This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Silicon Valley mobilizes against the FCC with an army of tens of thousands of tech companies. Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian joins us with his take on the fight for net neutrality. Plus, competitive video gamers get their league. Activision Blizzard announces the sale of the first 7 esports franchises, and New England Patriots owner Bob Kraft went all in. We will bring you that conversation. And we are live in Sun Valley, Idaho, with one of Silicon Valley's most influential voices. Y Combinator President Sam Altman joins us to discuss why he's leading the charge to find the next governor of California. But first, to our lead. The fight over net neutrality. A host of internet giants from Amazon to Facebook are joining forces to protest the rollback of net neutrality rules. Earlier this year, the FCC voted to start unwinding net neutrality rules put in place by the Obama administration. On one side, internet service providers like AT&T, Verizon, and Comcast, who are largely in favor of less regulation. On the other, Facebook, Google, Netflix, and other tech giants who could be hurt if the government starts interfering with the internet. It's a proposal FCC Chairman Ajit Pai has been pushing since his very first day in office under President Trump. Joining us now to discuss, Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian. Reddit is among those 70,000 websites and organizations protesting the rollback of net neutrality. So why join in on this protest?
Well, Reddit has always been at the forefront of fighting for the open internet. This is something that Steve, my co-founder, and I believe in personally, deeply, because that is what gave us the chance to start Reddit in a little apartment with 12 grand in the bank, and 12 years later to have built something that now is the 4th most trafficked site on the internet. Net neutrality made that possible.
You guys go big on your homepage. When you type reddit.com, the site goes dark. You've got a message there. Other companies are telling users to take action. Google, for example, saying, today's open internet ensures that both new and established services, whether offered up by an established internet company like Google, a broadband provider, or a small startup, have the ability to reach users on an equal playing field. Do you think this protest will actually make a difference?
Yes, yeah, because it's been great to see more and more companies come to join our ranks. You obviously, a lot of folks remember the internet blackout that happened because sites like Reddit and Wikipedia were protesting SOPA PIPA, and then the push for getting Title II classification of broadband a few years ago, which helped crystallize a lot of these net neutrality laws. Those happened because platforms and consumers basically had their voices heard, made phone calls. It seems very anachronistic, but calling up your senators or your representative is actually still one of the best ways to get your voice heard. And we now have an audience of hundreds of millions of people across these platforms who are now informed and are now going to be pushed to action. And while the FCC is not beholden to voters, because of course they're appointed by the president, our representatives, our congresspeople, our legislature is. And if we can show that this is an issue that is as bipartisan as we know it is, we can actually get those votes to actually crystallize some good legislation around this.
So we did speak to the FCC commissioner a few months ago who was appointed by President Trump, Ajit Pai. Take a listen to what he had to say about why he thinks this is important.
22 ISPs, small ones, told us just yesterday, Title II hangs over our businesses like a black cloud. And that's the kind of regulatory uncertainty and overreach that we want to remove, because every American deserves better, faster, and cheaper internet, and I'm committed to delivering it to them.
He also makes the argument that less regulation means more innovation, means that the future Facebooks and Googles and Netflixes of the world can grow and develop. How do you respond to that argument?
Well, I only know about it from the perspective of an entrepreneur. I think Chairman Pai is a lawyer. As an entrepreneur, I know that that level playing field that net neutrality ensures guarantees that innovation can thrive. Right? At the end of the day, what we want is for the free market to pick winners and losers, not big cable. And net neutrality is what makes the difference between those two things.
So what if the rollback happens? What would the consequences be?
Well, it would only be the start of a conversation that I know America would need to have with their elected officials. But what we could expect is the kind of things that unfortunately won't surprise many people who've dealt with their ISPs before, and that's increased rates. You can imagine an internet that starts to look a lot like your cable television, where you get like a default internet package that may have some news websites you like and some social networking sites you like, but the ones you really love actually have to cost more. And a tiered internet is just, it's fundamentally broken. It's actually pretty offensive an idea to most Americans who want to get access to the websites they want to access, and to so many entrepreneurs who want to know they can start a business and win because they've made something people want, and not lose simply because an incumbent's brokered a deal with one of a handful of ISPs.
The counter-argument is that tech companies have become incredibly powerful, if you look at Google and Facebook and Netflix, and that they're throwing their weight around.
Yeah, well, you know, I think Netflix is a great example, right? This was a company that for years was on our side championing, was on the side of the American people championing net neutrality. And then they got to be really big. And if you remember a couple of months ago, people asked, well, what side of this are you on? And at first, the company said, you know what, we're over it, we've outgrown it, we don't need it. And here is a publicly traded company who's only beholden to their shareholders, who, because of the blowback from their customers, because of the American people, said, just kidding. We actually really do support net neutrality, and we know this is important. And we're expecting a similar thing now to manifest with our senators and representatives, who are going to hear the same thing from their constituents. Because whether you're just a casual internet user trying to look at cute cat photos, or you're a small business owner in Kansas who's trying to start something, you want to have a level playing field as everyone else.
It's interesting, former Twitter CEO Dick Costolo was on the show yesterday talking about the meeting between all of the tech leaders and President Trump that they've been having in Washington, and he suggested that the president isn't listening. He might be holding these meetings, but not actually listening to what tech leaders have to say. What's your message to the administration?
Well, you know, right now, we're primarily focused on the Congress. We think that, especially regarding net neutrality, this is something where the legislature can actually accomplish something that is actually bipartisan and actually what Americans want. Reddit Inc. has actually never taken a formal trip to D.C. before. We actually will in the next month, now that we have a policy team forming. We want to start making relationships with senators and representatives. We haven't had any meetings yet with anyone on the executive side, but really our focus is where we can make immediate impact, and that's on the legislative.
What's the latest on Reddit? We know you recently returned to the company. What kind of progress is the company making?
Well, I got to give so much credit to my co-founder and our CEO, Steve Huffman. The two of us came back full-time a little over 2 years ago, and he has done an amazing job building this company into something really formidable. We're shipping a ton of code. There's over 240 employees now, and both the business and the product have grown significantly under his watch. So exciting times.
All right. Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian. Always great to have you here on the show. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.
Well, this net neutrality issue is also being discussed today at the annual conference in Sun Valley, Idaho, hosted by Allen & Company. Tim Armstrong, CEO of Oath, Verizon's internet media business, gave us his take on this day of action.
I think there's a lot of energy around making net neutrality work overall. I think when you zoom into Verizon's put out, William Johnson put out a really clear statement out of the company, which basically said, look, Verizon supports net neutrality. It's been penciled in. Congress should pass real laws around it and cement it. So I think that it's great. There's a day of action, that's been organized, and I think all of those things are really positive.
Coming up, esports draws in some major investors, including New England Patriots owner Bob Kraft. We'll hear from Kraft and Activision CEO Bobby Kotick next. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Bloomberg Tech TV weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. Razer is shooting for a Hong Kong IPO that could value the gaming gear maker at as much as $5 billion and help fund development of its own mobile phone. The company is said to be developing a mobile device tailored for its consumer base of hardcore gamers. The company sells its products via e-commerce giants JD.com and Alibaba, and in chains like Best Buy across the U.S. It's sold $1 billion worth of products globally in the last 3 years. Staying with gaming, Sun Valley, Idaho is where tech and media moguls are mingling and deal-making. Earlier today, video game giant Activision Blizzard announced the sale of its franchises in the Overwatch League, the first major esports league with city-based teams. Among the buyers, New England Patriots owner Robert Kraft. I spoke with Kraft and Activision CEO Bobby Kotick and started by asking Kraft why he made the move to esports.
We love the infrastructure that Bobby has set up at Activision Blizzard, and we've looked at a lot, and the Overwatch League to us with, having 30 million players at this point and just in its evolution really appeals to us. And the concept of having a team in the New England region, we know we have an infrastructure that we can really do a great job with the development of that. And being part of something that can be globalized is very, very relevant to us.
I want to talk a little bit about the finances here. Bobby, how long do you think it will take before the Overwatch League can compete with those leagues financially?
Well, look, it's important to us. We have a 26-year history of providing superior returns to our owners. And so we look at owners like Robert Kraft as an important constituent that we need to do our very best to provide a superior financial return as quickly as we can.
Now, Bob, the franchise fee is $20 million over time. How much will it cost to operate a team in addition to that?
We haven't really gotten into the details of the operating costs, but when you look at the way we've structured the league, the operating costs should be a lot lower than what you'd see in other traditional sports.
Okay, so let's talk about the future of esports. I mean, esports on television still hasn't been a great success. Bob, why do you think it can get there?
Well, we're looking at what's going on with sports generally and watching the millennials and the Z generation, how they consume product on their mobile devices, but also how they don't watch traditional sports products the way our generations did. And you see how much time is invested in playing these games and how they can connect with a global audience while doing it. It's just unheard of to us 10, 15 years ago. And we really believe this is the future. We think the infrastructure that Bobby has set up was something that the investment that he made in this league, it's something that was very appealing to us and a great way for us to enter this business. We looked at a lot of alternatives, and we felt this was the best way to do it.
So, Bobby, how much will players make? Can you give us an idea of that?
Look, I think the whole purpose for creating the Overwatch League was in the service of celebrating our players and the commitment that our players make to this game in what's now 196 countries around the world. And so there isn't any good reason that a professional Overwatch player shouldn't be rewarded and recognized like professional athletes. And our hope is that that's what will happen, and it will happen as quickly as possible.
And what do you see as the biggest source of revenue of the future? Will it be TV rights, tickets, or sponsorships?
Well, all of those will be the revenues, but the great opportunity for us is being able to partner with these incredibly successful owners and the young entrepreneurs who have built a lot of the endemic teams, who are really these high potential entrepreneurs that seized on esports as a great opportunity. And so the combination of the professional experience like we get with Robert Kraft and the great capabilities we see in some of our endemic owners, that should allow us to generate revenues in the broadcast rights, in sponsorships, in licensing, in venue fees. And a big part of what we're trying to do in building a local-based league is build the local affinity that you see in traditional sports, so that the Boston enthusiasts, the Boston players of Overwatch, will have a place to go, will have heroes they can celebrate, will have role models that come from the professional athletes that are going to play our games. And so that's a really important part of what we're doing.
Bloomberg has reported that TV networks, including ESPN, are bracing for a drop in ad revenue based on NFL ratings last season. How do you respond to that?
Well, we're really here to talk about esports, Emily.
No, but I'll do it. You know, I think anyone who looks at last year understands the role that the election had, and look what the two news networks, main news networks, are doing this year. I think after the election was over, the NFL was within 2% of ratings last year. I feel very confident that we're going to have very strong ratings this coming year, and you just wait and see, and remember I told you that.
My conversation there with Activision CEO Bobby Kotick and Bob Kraft, Chairman and CEO of the Kraft Group and the New England Patriots. Coming up, yet another case of sexual misconduct has coming out of venture capital, resulting in another partner heading for the exit sign. More on the backlash against sexual harassment in tech next. This is Bloomberg. Now to the latest in a series of scandals alleging sexual harassment and other offenses that have rocked the venture capital industry in the last few weeks. Seattle-based Ignition Partners has announced that its managing partner, Frank Artali, has resigned after receiving 2 claims of misconduct. In a statement, Ignition said it received an anonymous allegation last week, which followed another accusation of inappropriate conduct by Artali last year. Joining us now, our Bloomberg tech reporter Lizette Chapman, who covers venture capital. So yet another case, yet another venture capitalist. What happened this time?
Well, some of the details are still coming out. What we know is exactly what you said in the intro, that there was a claim made against him a year ago. I understand that the firm did investigate at that time. That's what we are being told. And that nothing happened at that time. But then last week, another allegation was made. And as of last night, he had resigned.
So it's worth going through what's happened in the last few weeks. Justin Callbeck, big story out of The Information, where multiple women came forward about him harassing them. He resigned. The firm, the fund itself, the second fund, is winding down. Dave McClure at 500 Startups has resigned. Yeah. Chris Sacca, reported by the New York Times, an incident with him. He has made statements. What is the problem?
Mark Cantor. There are a lot of VCs that have treated women improperly, and based on the reporting that myself and others here at Bloomberg have been doing over the past week, it sounds like it really falls into 2 camps. There's the outright sexual assaults and harassment and requests for a quid pro quo in some cases, where if you do X with me, I will invest in you. That's a very extreme example, and most of them tend to fall into the second category, which is being spoken down to in many cases, or having questions directed at their male co-founder rather than them, even though they happen to be the one pitching the company, and other slights. So, what is happening? I think that a lot of things are coming to a head, and a lot of women now are speaking out, where before they were afraid to, or felt like they would be punished.
You mentioned Mark Cantor, who's another entrepreneur who was singled out by the New York Times, who has also made statements of apology.
Well, not really.
Well, yes, there are the apologies, and then there's like the second apology, because the initial apology, there's backlash against the initial apology.
It was a parody.
Right, but we'll leave that there. The fact that this is happening to women is one problem. The fact that firms may know about it is another problem, and not take action. What do we know in terms of what's happening on that front?
It's a really good point. Right now, there are, in the case of Ignition, for example, they did know, they did investigate. It seems that there are a number of other firms that maybe are also asking questions of partners, whether on the early side, whether it's already panned out, like is in the case of Dave McClure and 500 Startups, or whether it's on the earlier side. The question then becomes, how much do they share among their network, and do they pass along the information that the person's a bad actor? The first thing to determine is whether these allegations are true, and so it would appear that some conversations are going on about that to determine whether it's accurate.
Former Twitter CEO Dick Costolo was on the show yesterday, and he really put the burden of responsibility on LPs, which are the investors that fund venture capital firms, and suggested that LPs actually know about this behavior sometime and still fund these venture capitalists. Right. What do we know about the diligence that these LPs are doing?
I think Dick Costolo is maybe overstating how much LPs know. You know, when an LP does due diligence in a firm, they'll make 20, 30, 40, who knows how many reference calls, but typically it's around that number to find out, you know, beyond the quantitative, like who is this investor, you know, what is their track record, what's their IRR, do we like the sector, do we like the stage, do we like the geographic focus? Then you get into questions of character and of judgment, and you know, questions are asked. When I was speaking to an LP source earlier, no, it was last week, you know, this individual said, you know, it seems like there's a code. You know, I was told go talk to you know, these 3 people about this individual and you will find some things out. This individual then said, and I called these people and it was like the Twilight Zone. Maybe there's a code that I'm not picking up on. So I think that there is, and I just talked to someone just now who said that, you know, the worst reference that you can possibly give someone is, oh, they're a great guy, I've worked with them and really great, super experience. Hang up the phone. He said, that's the worst you can say. Right. What you really want to say is, you know, that I wouldn't hesitate to back that person again, and I would, you know, go and work with them in a heartbeat. Right.
Difficult to figure out from a reporter's perspective what they knew and what they didn't know and when. Lizette Chapman, who covers VC for us, thanks so much. We'll be right back after this quick break.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. Former Brazilian President Lula was found guilty of corruption and sentenced to more than 9 years in prison. He was convicted of taking bribes and money laundering. Lula was president of Brazil from 2003 to 2011. The current president there is also under investigation. The EU's chief Brexit negotiator says Britain must meet tough conditions in divorce talks. In Brussels today, Michel Barnier said Britain needs to make significant progress on citizens' rights and the bill it must pay to the EU and the Irish border before a trade deal talk can begin. 5 men convicted of the murder of Russian opposition leader Boris Nemtsov will be sentenced tomorrow. Prosecutors are asking for life in prison for the triggerman and long sentences for the other 4 men. Nemtsov, a Putin critic, was gunned down in 2015. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen says the 2-year conflict there is intensifying. He lists the expansion of terrorist groups, 14 million people in desperate need of food, and the worst cholera epidemic in the world as part of the ongoing crisis. One of the largest icebergs ever recorded has broken off from an ice shelf in Antarctica. The iceberg weighs more than 1 trillion tons, and it has twice the volume of Lake Erie. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. It's just after 5:30 p.m. Wednesday here in Washington, 7:30 Thursday morning now in Sydney. We are joined by Bloomberg's Paul Allen with a look at the markets. Paul, we had a fresh record for the Dow today in the States.
That's right, Elisa, and that looks like it's going to propel markets in the Asia-Pacific higher. We've got Nikkei futures looking positive as markets in Japan wait on the results of fast retailing. ASX futures, meanwhile, 0.4% higher. We also saw some strength on the Aussie dollar as well on the back of those rather dovish comments from the Fed Chair Janet Yellen. Other banks around the region will hold rate decisions today as well. The Bank of Korea is expected to hold its 7-day repo rate at 1.25%, while in Malaysia, Bank Negara Malaysia also expected to hold its overnight policy rate at 3%. Some important data out of China today. We will be getting the trade balance for the month of June. That's expected to come in at a $42.6 billion surplus. That's up almost $2 billion on May. Exports expected to drive the result there. We've got an 8.9% rise in exports forecast in June, up from 8.7% in May, while imports are expected to have pulled back a little. I'm Paul Allen in Sydney. More from Bloomberg Technology next.
annual conference in Sun Valley, Idaho, hosted by Allen and Company. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump are said to be heading there to mingle with tech and media moguls. This as the email scandal concerning the Trump administration's possible ties to Russia continues to swirl in Washington. Bloomberg's David Gura is standing by in Sun Valley with a very special guest. David?
Emily, thank you very much. I'm here with Sam Altman, the president of Y Combinator, out with a new project today called United Slate.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about it. What are you trying to do with it?
We're trying to recruit a slate of candidates and someone to run a ballot initiative for the California 2018 elections. I think I'm pretty disappointed with where our political system has gotten. I think a lot of people in the country are justly unhappy, and we're in the middle of this massive shift. The technological revolution is as big as the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution, and we're not treating it as such. So I think it's time for sort of a new social contract and a very different way of doing things where everybody can benefit.
So for whom are you looking, and how will you decide who you're going to back among the people who sign up or express interest in this?
So I tried the strategy of just saying, here's everything I believe, here are my core principles, here are 10 policies that I think are really important, and here's a long list. And if you agree with these, then I'm interested in talking. So I'm interested in people who are great leaders, effective people, and generally agree with what I think. But open to career politicians, new people that want to become politicians.
As you talk to those people who may or may not be interested in getting into politics, what's the hurdle to doing it? If you know somebody who's bright and optimistic and would like to get into public policy, what's keeping him or her from doing it, in your experience?
I mean, so many things. Yeah, it's like people like their lives, and they're like, why would I go do it? I understand that we need better people in politics, but what a miserable life. I don't want to subject myself to that. So that's a big hurdle to get over.
If you, as I understand it, fault government for some things, why is this the route to do it? In other words, if you want to affect change in policy, why is getting into that arena a way to make change?
Well, I think that's how our political system works. I mean, that's the fundamental tenet of democracy, is that the people have to participate. And if all of us say it's somebody else's problem and I'm going to just focus on my job and what I do, then I think we get into this situation we're in now.
How wide is it's a wide geographic gap, but how wide is the ideological gap between where you live and Washington, D.C.? I recall during the last administration, the Secretary of Defense went out to Silicon Valley, tried to make some inroads.
Yeah, I met with him a bunch of
Emily
times.
Chang going in to interview Leon Panetta whilst he was there. How wide is that gap? Has it gotten any narrower?
I would say it's gotten wider with the current administration. I think there are huge changes coming, and you can pretend that they're not coming and tell people that the cause of their problems is something else, or you can be honest about what's really happening, but that's harder, and the current administration doesn't do that.
Living where I live in New York, reporting in Washington, D.C., we've been told that Peter Thiel is the conduit through which Silicon Valley can channel its interests in policy, what it wants to see changed through him. Is that happening? You know him well. Obviously, he's a partner at Y Combinator. Is he doing that? Is he a voice for you and your colleagues?
You should ask him that. From what I've heard, I don't think he's spending a lot of time being that conduit, but I hope somebody does it.
I know that in October of last year, you said you weren't going to cut ties with him. He's still a member of your firm. Have you reevaluated any of that? What role is he playing within?
He's never been a partner at the firm, but he is, advises some startups. I think that's the kind of thing, that's one of the many kind of things that is wrong with this current political system is, if someone disagrees with me or is supporting someone else, I'm cutting ties with them. I think we have gotten into the situation we're in right now because of extreme behavior like that. And I don't think that's the path forward. I mean, I think we need, part of the reason I picked United is I think we need people to say, hey, we're like all in this together. If America falls from, global world superpower status, that's really bad for all of us. And we have devolved into this fight where it's like, I hate you, you're horrible, you're the worst thing ever, absolute, these like extreme statements, which is not a surprise given that we have a reality TV star as our president. But I really think we need to get back to an atmosphere where we say, here are these fundamental American principles, here are the policies we want to see enacted, and we need to work with everybody to make this happen.
There was a moment, I'd say there probably still is a moment, where a lot of the country is looking to Silicon Valley and executives there to lead on a number of these issues. I think of Mark Benioff, I think of others who've spoken out on the issues of immigration, equality. How do you get others to embrace that in a long-term way? The election has passed. There may be dissatisfaction among some quarters with who is in office in Washington. How do you keep the engagement in the political system up?
Well, I'm trying to do my part here, and I hope other people will do other things as well. I do think, given that this is a technology revolution that we're in the middle of, I do think there's a moral obligation for people, I don't want to call myself a tech leader, but people in the tech industry, to be vocal and try to help and try to get involved. And I think if, we have an opportunity and a responsibility to show people a better future and say, here's what life could be like. We can get to a place where young families can afford homes again. We can get to a place where everyone gets to world-class education. Everyone has great health care provided by the state. And our current government's in the way of that. And here is a set of technology and policy that we can get back to. We were the greatest country in the world, still are, but we were especially great when we were really good at, as a country, leading the world in technology across many different industries. And we invested probably more than anybody ever has in research and development. And our government did that, and it led to just massive prosperity. In this country, we had 100 years of incredible territorial expansion, then we had 100 years of incredible technological expansion, and we've had just this massive growth, which you need in a democracy. In a democracy to work, everyone's sensitive to their lives getting better every year. If there's economic growth, both of our lives get better every year. If there's no growth or very little like we have now, you have to vote against me. Your life getting better has got to come at the expense of mine. And that's where we are right now. So I think we desperately need to get back to technological growth as a country. And it's up to us to explain to people why that can work.
Very quickly here, you've made the argument that there should be freer or more open immigration policies. Do you feel like you're winning that argument? Is that argument being conveyed well to those who are in position to change policy?
Clearly not. I mean, it's not happening. Whether we're making the argument well or not, it's not happening.
But you're optimistic about it still?
Look, I think the United States should be the technology developer for the world. We should think about how many people at this conference are immigrants. Think how many people came here and built these companies that have created hundreds of thousands, millions of jobs. There's an argument to make, and I'm willing to consider both sides, that low-scale immigration is not necessarily good for the country. But there is no argument that I've ever heard that letting entrepreneurs into the country, letting the world's smartest scientists into the country is not good for us. And that argument, I do feel like we can win and we will, but we got caught up in this thing right now.
Sam, great pleasure to speak with you. Thank you very much. That's Sam Altman of Y Combinator and of the United Slate, UnitedSlate.com. Emily in San Francisco, back to you.
All right, David Gura on the ground for us in Sun Valley. Thanks so much, David. Now, Amazon's third annual Prime Day ended up being its biggest ever global shopping event, surpassing sales on Black Friday and Cyber Monday. The event grew by more than 60% over the last year, generating about $1 billion in revenue. The 30-hour event also saw more new members joining Prime than any other day. Coming up, London has been known as the hub of fintech. Does this reputation still hold true? We'll talk with the CEO of Funding Circle next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. An update on a story we told you about earlier in the week. The Chinese government says it will not disrupt legitimate access to the global internet by businesses and general users. The response comes after Bloomberg reported that China had ordered telecom carriers to bar individuals from using VPN services to circumvent its Great Firewall. The Ministry of Industry and Information Technology said in a statement, trade or multinational enterprises, if they require leased lines or other methods to access the internet abroad, can turn to authorized telecommunications entities. The existing notice will not affect normal operations. Sticking with global news, this marks FinTech Week in London. We're now joined by Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde, who will be speaking with a special guest. Caroline?
Hey, Emily. Yes, thank you. As you mentioned, this week, it's FinTech Week in London, and clearly the ecosystem, it's alive, it's well, as a new funding round was announced today for local banking startup Revolut. It's got $66 million coming from the likes of Index Ventures and Balderton Capital to fund international expansion and a move to cryptocurrencies. Now, there is one man who knows what it's like to scale a London-based fintech company successfully. It is none other than Samir Desai, CEO of Funding Circle. That's the #1 online lender to small and medium-sized businesses, and it's one of the UK's so-called unicorns. Samir, you're joining us live from San Francisco. You're a jet-set man, and I want to start with the fact that you have scaled. You've got headquarters in Berlin, you've got them in San Francisco. How is the US business going?
So it's going really well. So if you look at our business, we started in the UK in 2010 and we launched in the US in 2013. We've been really pleased with the progress, and actually around 30% of our business globally now is actually comes from overseas markets, so not from the UK, and those are growing at a much faster rate than the UK. So we've been really pleased with the progress today, and we subsequently entered actually Germany and the Netherlands as well. So we'd like to keep adding more and more international markets over time.
So that's Europe done. You got US on the agenda. What about Asia? Would you look to move further abroad, because the Revolut's eyeing up Asia?
Well, I mean, I think we're not quite done with Europe yet. You know, I think we're in 3 markets. You know, as you know, there are many more that we'd like to go to. But what we found with our business model is it does work regardless of the market. You know, we want Funding Circle to be the first choice for small businesses globally, wherever they are when they want to access finance to expand and grow. And so, you know, I think we've got a little bit more work to do in Europe before we start looking to other markets.
How has, of course, the ever ongoing Brexit debate affected you? Has it affected lending on Funding Circle? Has it affected the investor base or the businesses looking for small loans, or has it not as yet?
So obviously when Brexit happened, we were concerned, to put it mildly. You know, it was a big dislocation event. We didn't really know how people would react. What we came out and said to our small business customers in the wider market was like that we're very much open for business. You know, we started Funding Circle at the just after one of the biggest financial crises there were, because we felt there needed to be an alternative way of getting money to small businesses. And actually what we've seen since Brexit is businesses boomed. So Funding Circle originated record amounts of loans. Actually, in the first 6 months of the year, Funding Circle did nearly as much net new lending in the UK as the entire banking system combined. So what you're starting to see, I think, is even in times of stress, actually this model can really provide a viable alternative. So far from being the kind of event that we were worried about, it actually provided a great opportunity for the business.
Now, I mentioned you're also in Europe, and of course you have some base in Berlin. It's interesting, there's news out today that Samsung is launching a new VC, a new home that's going to be looking for offices in Berlin. How much are you surprised by perhaps the VC money coming into Europe? Are you feeling like it's escalating as money coming into the startup scene?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've noticed over the past few years is, you know, really you can start a business anywhere, to be honest. It could be in Europe, it could be in Asia, it could be in the US. Actually, a lot of the capital, so venture capital and also late stage money, is increasingly becoming global. So it's agnostic about where a business starts. What people are really looking for is ambitious businesses that are looking to go global, and I think it makes sense for people to have lots of different operations in different markets to be close to the entrepreneurs and businesses trying to do that.
And talking about being close to entrepreneurs and businesses, it interests me that I think it's in your London office. You've got an entire floor open to companies, startups smaller than yourselves who want to come and rent desks. Why do this? I mean, are you looking at acquisition opportunities, or you just want to be close to what other new startups are doing?
Well, it was very simple, really, because I mean, our business is growing incredibly fast. So, you know, we've originated about $4 billion since we started the business 7 years ago, but actually $1 billion of that came in the last 6 months. So the business is scaling incredibly fast, and what that means is we need to keep adding more and more people all the time. So what we found was that we were constantly having to move offices, and by taking another floor and actually renting it out, we actually, you know, ironically make a little bit of money on that, but also it gives us, which wasn't the primary aim, but you know, it gives us space that we can flow into. So it's actually been really nice. We've got a number of different startups there. It's cheaper than renting anywhere else, to be honest, in London, and it's created a nice little ecosystem in its own right. Unfortunately, we're going to kill that because we're going to move into all that space at some point, but you know, it's been nice while it lasted.
a record-breaking 2017 in terms of new lending and managing to have a side business as well in terms of renting out desks. Great to speak with you, Samir Desai. Thank you so much for your time while you're in San Francisco. Can't wait to have you back here in London. It is, of course, CEO of Funding Circle. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right, Caroline Hyde for us there in London. Thanks, Caroline. Coming up, global cybersecurity concerns continue to take center stage. We'll talk to the CEO of Flashpoint to see what the firm is doing to prevent future attacks next. This is Bloomberg. Earlier today, Christopher Wray, President Trump's pick to lead the FBI, faced the Senate Judiciary Committee as he begins his confirmation process. Wray was asked about his thoughts on the ongoing debate over the battle of encryption versus privacy. Take a listen.
I do know that we're going to have to, as a society, both the FBI and the Justice Department, this committee and others, industry, our foreign partners, we are going to have to find solutions to these problems because the role of technology is overtaking us all. And so I'm committed to try to work with everyone to try to find a solution.
Sticking with the FBI, one former consultant to the FBI's senior management team is now the CEO of the cybersecurity firm Flashpoint. Josh Lefkowitz executes the company's strategic vision to empower organizations with business risk intelligence derived from the deep dark web. Earlier today, the company announced the close of a $28 million Series C funding round led by new investor Georgian Partners. Josh joins us now live from New York. So, Josh, your ability to see deeply into the dark web has been touted. What gives you any special ability over the other firms?
So what we do at Flashpoint is really, first and foremost, understand our customers' requirements. We work with customers across 18 different verticals, from financial services, retail, legal, and well beyond. And we have an approach that really blends a deep fusion of subject matter expertise with analysts who speak 15 different languages, who understand the intricacies and complexities of illicit actor communities, whether they be Eastern European cyber criminal communities, whether they be Iranian hacker communities, et cetera, and also pair them up with software development technology that provides a level of scale and visibility that heretofore was unavailable in the enterprise market. And what we found is that's enabled us to really position as a true partner, helping our customers across the enterprise to navigate through and address problem sets that are multivariable, highly sensitive, and truly complex.
Now, some of your analysts used to work for U.S. intelligence agencies. How do they do their job without the resources of the U.S. government?
So what we found, and this really dates back to the origins of the company in the early 2000s, is that there's a tremendous richness of intelligence, open source, unclassified intelligence that can be gleaned if you know where to look. And that's why when you look at our model, which again pairs that deep subject matter expertise with technology, those subject matter experts play such a critical role to really have that radar and that situational awareness to understand where illicit actors in particular communities operate. Is it in deep web, password-protected forums? Is it in dark web, password-protected marketplaces? Is it in internet relay chat? Is it in peer-to-peer chat software, et cetera? And without that deep on-the-ground understanding from your subject matter experts, it presents a real problem. And so we've been fortunate to attract some of the best in the industry that are a core driver of the success that we've experienced to date, and will be a core driver of the success that we're forecasting going forward.
Very quickly, you know, big banks, energy firms, insurance companies are all using your technology, but some of them just want the bad guys out. Do they really need to know who hacked them or why?
So it's a great question. I think in many ways it's less about the attribution and more about the how and the why. And when we think about business risk intelligence, it's really about driving more informed decision-making around risk that you may be exposed to across the entire spectrum of your organization. Certainly cybersecurity teams are front and center, but it spans far more broadly than that, from insider threat to physical security to fraud and well beyond. And so what we've seen is the ability to...
We'll have to leave it there, Josh. I'm sorry. Josh Lefkowitz, Flashpoint CEO, thanks so much for joining us. We'll be back with more Bloomberg Tech tomorrow.